Alright, mid-Henry again, and this is my review of the 1:100 scale Mercurius. And this is the 4th entry into my Oz project. And like Virgo and Virgo 2, this is a almost completely scratch-built model kit. Pretty much the only things on this kit that I didn't scratch build were the hip joints and the hands, and even then they were modified. So everything else is made from scratch. I used mostly recasts from my Virgo model kit to make this, and then modified the parts, and then made recasts of those modified parts. So almost everything that you see here is resin. In fact, everything is resin with the exception of a few metal parts that I've used for the joints. So anyways, you can see this is what the kit looks like completely unpainted. So let's put a coat of paint on this guy and continue on with the review. And after a few days getting it all painted up, this is what the Mercurius ends up looking like. And it's trademark red color scheme. And there we go. So as far as the colors, I just did a base coat of pure red and then highlighted with kind of a sharp pink color. I just used standard gray for all the joints, black for the planet defensors, tan for those little circle thingies on the face there. The decals, as you can see, I got the custom Oz decals on the hip there, Oz, and then the exact same decal, only smaller, on the left shoulder. And all the other ones are just generic little caution marking decals. They're nothing special. I got them from other master grades, and some of them were Samuel decals. And then, of course, I've got the little clear green jewel for the camera eye there. So as far as all the stuff that Mercurius has got, he's got these planet defensors, obviously, attached to his back. He's got the crash shield, as you can see here, which comes with a clear yellow beam effect part. The beam gun, right there. I gave him only 4 hands. I gave him 2 closed fists, which you can see here, and then 2 trigger finger hands. And of course, like my 2 scratch-built Virgos, I made an energy shield for Mercurius. So that's all the stuff he comes with. And I guess now we can go ahead and get into articulation. Now, kind of like my Virgos, the posability and articulation isn't perfect, but I'm very happy to say it is much better than Virgo 2. Virgo 2 was a nightmare as far as posability and articulation goes. Now the neck I've got on a ball joint, so it can go forward and back, side to side a little bit. Can rotate about that far to each side. This little bar down in front of the neck gets in the way, but oh well. It's got rotation, mid torso there. The waist can also rotate, but it's kind of tight. And it's actually kind of better just to rotate in there. And the hip joints keep wanting to come loose. That's really the main downside of the articulation on this guy, is the hip joints, but I'll get into those later. The shoulder joints, I've got these roll swing joints which can go back and forth, and the arms can come out. They can come out a little bit further if you kind of like pull the joint out, but if you don't pull it out, they're only going to go about that far. Anyway, 360 rotation below the shoulder joint. The elbow joints can bend pretty much a full 180 and touch your shoulder armor there. And the wrists are on ball joints, pretty much like every other Gundam model kit. The shoulder armor is, I had some trouble thinking of how I was going to attach it. Well, I ended up using quite a few magnets on this kit, and that's how I decided to attach the shoulder armor. There's a magnet inside the shoulder joint there, and then there's another magnet on the back side of the shoulder armor there, and it just connects on like so. And it seems to hold it in place pretty well. It's a little bit loose, but it seems to hold it, and I guess it works. I probably should have put 2 magnets in there, but it seems to be working pretty good with just 1. So anyway, on to these hips. These hips are... I'm not really thrilled with them. I recasted the Zaku 2.0 hips, which work great on a Zaku 2.0, but when you're working with recasts and trying to apply them to a model kit that you've built from scratch, they don't always work out as well as the originals. Anyway, I've got a polycap in the waist section here that they're plugged into on each side, and they can actually go quite a ways forward, and then they can go back a little bit. They don't go quite as far back, since this is how the joint is so far forward there. And ooh, they would go out, but that joint is so tight that it's really not going to go out very far. Plus, you got this large side skirt, which is going to be touching the waist section right there anyway, prohibiting any real outward movement. And then you've got 360-degree rotation below the hip as well. So, while the posability is pretty good on the hips, the stability is just not all that great. They want to fall out of the waist all the time. Anyway, the knee joints are very well articulated. As you can see, they bend a full 180 degrees. They look kind of funny. Originally, I had these pieces of armor here on the side actually attached to the knee joint, and that looked really weird. And I decided to just leave those attached to the leg instead. So it looks a little bit better, but still kind of awkward. Although I do like the way the knee armor moves with the knee joint. I thought that was a nice little touch. And there goes that hip joint again. Anyway, the ankles are on ball joints just like on Virgo and Virgo 2, so they can go side to side a little bit, forward and back. The ankle armor just kind of floats. It's not really attached to anything. And there you go. So that about does it for articulation. Now we can get into the weapons and accessories. So I showed you all the weapons at the beginning of the video. Now we get to see them in action. This is the crash shield. It's basically a solid piece of epoxy putty, just in kind of a half dome shape. And then these little protrusions here I made out of metal tubes. And just took a handle from, I think that was from a Tallgeese 3 or something, and pinned it and glued it onto the back there. And there you go, it's relatively simple. And put it into the hand like so. The only real downside to this crash shield is, since it's made out of epoxy putty, it's quite heavy. Quite heavy actually, so he's going to have some trouble holding it up. In fact, I may have to tighten these joints up with some glue. But he does have an effect part for it. Right here, clear yellow beam effect part. And basically the way I made this is I made the original out of epoxy putty and just sculpted it out with a Dremel tool and an X-Acto knife until I got it in the shape I wanted it. Made a mold of this and then recast it in clear yellow resin. Did a little airbrushing down here at the base, and this is what it ended up looking like. Just put it right there in the end of the crash shield, and there you go. Looks pretty darn good, if I do say so myself. So next up is the beam gun. Very small, simple gun. I just kind of took, I think, a GPO-1 beam rifle and chopped it up and modified it until I had this. Added a little clear lens right there. And it's small and light enough that if his fingers will stay in place. And once I actually get his hand wrapped around it, plug that in there, and he can hold it with absolutely no trouble at all. But the Mercurius' signature weapon is, of course, the Planet Defensors. And if I rotate him around like so, you can see how these are connected. I've just got a little gray piece connected to the back, and they're all attached like so. Now, originally, the only way I thought they were going to work is by pinning them all together, but luckily, I thought of another idea that worked out even better, which is magnets. I'd already mentioned I use magnets on this kit, and almost all of these are connected with magnets. The two that are connected to the gray parts are actually pinned on there, but when I take them off, the pins in the gray part, it won't actually be sticking out of the planet defensor. All the other planet defensors are connected with magnets. And as you can see, they're a little bouncy, a little bit loose, but they do stay in place. And I think it actually worked out really, really well. So I'm pretty pleased. I was a little bit afraid that they weren't going to be able to support the weight of, all 5 of them on each side, but they seem to work out, and I'm very, very happy with the way they look. And of course, just like with my 2 Virgo kits, I made an energy shield for Mercurius. Basically just a piece of clear, flat plastic. Put a little hot glue around the edge, airbrushed it with some fluorescent pink, and put in some little pins for the planet defensors to sit on. It was kind of a challenge putting all 10 of those things on there, because putting 4 or 8 on there is usually fine, but getting all 10 on there, they start to kind of weigh it down. It's a little bit wobbly, but they do stand up, and I think it actually looks pretty darn good. So, an effective accessory in my book. Now, one feature that I really wanted to make a point of including on this kit from the very beginning was the removable faceplate. Now, originally, I wanted to design it in such a way that the faceplate could actually slide out and then flip up. But just looking at the geometry of the head and the engineering that would be involved in making such a flippable faceplate, it just wasn't going to work out. So luckily, a user on one of the work in progress videos for this guy suggested that I use the magnets that I had used on the shoulder armor and planet defensors, and that was a very, very good idea, and that's what I decided to go with. So I can just pull this off. It's magnetic, and I have to put it up under the antenna, but there we go. It's kind of goofy looking, I know, but that's just the way it works. Plus, 99.9% of the time, I'm going to have them displayed with the faceplate closed anyway. These magnets are stronger than they look. Anyway, close that, and there we go. And for a couple comparisons, here is Mercurius next to its twin, the V8. And here's the Master Grade Wing Gundam, just for a size comparison. And the kit that Mercurius and V8, well, in the show, Mercurius and V8 were turned into the Virgo, but in the way I built them, Virgo was turned into Mercurius and V8, but either way, there they are, all lined up together. So, that about does it for my review of my 1:100 scale scratch-built Mercurius. And that's one more entry into the Oz project down. So, next up will be V8's review, and we'll move on from there. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the way this kit turned out. I really like the way it looks. I think I did a much better job with posability and articulation than I did with Virgo 2, or Virgo for that matter. But as you saw through the view, there are still a few issues. The hip joints, for one. I think the ankles could have a little bit better mobility, but they're not going to be seeing too much action anyway. The crash shield is a little bit too heavy for the arm to support it. That's another issue that's kind of bugs me. But other than that, I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out. I really like, I really do like the new elbow and shoulder joints I designed for Mercurius and V8. I think they work out so much better than the elbow and shoulder, elbow and knee joints, that I used on Virgo and Virgo 2. Much more improved than on those two kits. The Zaku 2 hip joints, I think were a good idea in theory. They just didn't work out all that well in practice, but still, even though they're not as good as I would have liked them to be, they're still better than the hip joints that I used on Virgo and Virgo 2, so The Oz Project kits are getting better slowly and surely, but they are definitely getting better with each kit, I think. So hopefully by the time I get to the end of the Oz Project, the kits will be really, really good. So that about does it for this review, and with that, I'll see you guys next time.